We were trying to do a very spectacular type of story with very little money. The budget was so low that I found that if I had an octopus, 2 less tentacles to animate would save some money on the special effects and time. Time is money, of course. So I cut off 2 tentacles, and actually we had a sextopus. We kept them disguised underneath the water because nobody would count them, we didn't think.
Ray's little secret was eventually betrayed in a magazine read by fantasy film fans. But it didn't spoil anyone's fun.
I don't think there were any repercussions. I don't recall the city fathers banning the picture. And I'm sure that no one really worried about an octopus pulling down the Golden Gate Bridge. I seem to be a very destructive person. I like to do things of a mass destruction.
For example, this attack on the nation's capital by alien invaders. The year was 1956.
Charles Schneer liked to take clippings out of the newspaper in the morning, and there was a big ado about flying saucers. So our next project became Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I went to Washington with a still camera and photographed all the locations I wanted, and then we sent a special cameraman to photograph the backgrounds based on my storyboard of photographs. And that was a challenge to work on because I had never used animation before for mechanical things like a spaceship. So I felt we could do things that you couldn't do ordinarily, and took it on as a challenge.
The thing about Ray's work that is so amazing is how bold he is. Look at Earth versus the Flying Saucers. You've got these flying saucers. And you've seen those in other movies, like Day the Earth Stood Still. And in that movie, they just sort of come and land, and they kind of like don't even want to show it. But Ray's movies, they're right there. He came up with great angles, great ideas, great dynamics that they could fly, and he was not afraid to show you the star of the movie.
You had to have a certain amount of destruction or you couldn't get the picture off the ground. So I ended up with the saucers crashing into the Capitol Dome and knocking over the Washington Monument. I'm glad to see they still stand today.
Ideally, these scenes should have been shot by high-speed cameras, which create, paradoxically, ultra-slow-motion images. These, in turn, give the illusion that light, tiny objects have the weight of large ones when they fall. But this was low-budget filmmaking. They couldn't afford the cameras.
So I had to resort to animating all this destruction frame by frame. And I ended up, when the Washington Monument was hit by a flying saucer, each piece of brick that fell out of the monument had to be on a separate wire. As the saucer plowed through the Washington Monument, cutting it in two.
You can sense a person made it, that it's a person struggling with a medium to present themselves.
That person was also struggling to leave Hollywood.
Elementals was planned to be in Paris, where these creatures nestled in the Eiffel Tower. Because I wanted a trip to Europe, I got itchy feet. And the only way I could see to get to Europe was to make some location there, and then I would be sent for nothing, so, and be paid for it. But it was never produced.
They were humanoid bats, and Ray plays their victim in this test footage, all that survives of the project. If he was literally carried away by his idea, no one else was. But he would get his trip anyway, and soon enough make his permanent base in London. His deliverance was the Emir. Brought back from Venus by a space probe, he was originally supposed to land in Chicago. But 50s film economics supported Ray's wanderlust. 20 million miles to Earth was shot in Rome.
I wanted a humanoid creature because, having had experience with Mighty Joe Young, I felt you could do much more with a humanoid type of creature, although we didn't want to make it a man. He was taken out of his element and brought to Earth in a strange environment.
When the creature hatches at the beginning and comes up and kind of rubs its eyes, you just really feel an empathy for that guy. And that's true through all his films, that empathy for character. It's an actor. You're looking at an animated actor on the screen.
So the Emir, we wanted to make him sympathetic. He was taken out of his element.
Two things changed the Emir from a harmless little guy into a menace: the hostility of Earthlings as they confronted an alien figure, and a curious addiction to sulfur. It accelerated his growth and perhaps exacerbated his temper.
He wasn't really aggressive until the dog and the farmer became aggressive to him. And he finally got quite vicious because he was tortured and tormented by man. The poor boy was just a helpless soul out of his environment. And he finally ended up in Rome atop the Colosseum. Of course, that was influenced by Kong on top of the Empire State Building. I thought it would be a rather dramatic way of ending it. The film. Man, of course, destroys what he doesn't understand. I've been responsible for destroying New York, San Francisco, and Washington, and we kind of got tired out of doing these destructive pictures constantly, which were popular in the 50s.
So we took the path of action, we took the path of suspense, we took the path of imagination.
That path was illuminated by drawings Ray had made some years earlier to illustrate his ideas for a movie about the adventures of Sinbad, the legendary Arabian sailor.
The origin of the seventh voyage came a few years after Mighty Joe. I wanted to find a new outlet, and I developed these 8 big sketches based on the adventures of Sinbad. I felt he was a personification of adventure.
When I saw those drawings, I was absolutely overwhelmed by them. And I didn't need any more than those drawings to sell it to the distributor. And that was our first color picture.
It was also Ray's first experiment with his signature creation, the living skeleton.
The skeleton was really the inspiration of going to Sinbad when I first started making my drawings. And in Sakura's castle, I think it came off as a possibility because he could animate inanimate objects through his black magic.
The seventh voyage of Sinbad starred Kerwin Matthews and Catherine Grant. But it was Ray's stop-motion artistry that made it one of the surprise hits of 1958. And, in its influence on the next generation of special effects people, one of the more significant movies of its time.
For me, there's nothing like being trapped in a cave with one skeleton, because in this cave in Sinbad, you can't get away.
Matthews, playing Sinbad, was, in Ray's words, a master at maintaining the illusion that he was actually dueling with an imaginary creature. In reality, the skeleton was not tricked into the film until months after principal photography was completed.
I was about 5 years old, and at its first theatrical release, I saw Seventh Voyage of Sinbad with my mom. It had a very profound effect on me.
I saw it 8 times the first week it came out. And I had, which is very hard when you're like 12 years old, and you have to find friends and relatives or neighbors that'll drive by the movie theater to drop you off so you can see the movie over and over again. There was just something about that Cyclops standing on the beach, the kind of orange skin and the blue sky, and the spectacle of it that I had never seen in any other film.
For many years, I even had dreams about the Cyclops growing in the family fish tank, living there, but always on the verge of bursting out and coming after me.